Hi everyone. Today is Ash Wednesday, so obviously that marks the beginning of Lent. So today we're going to start some daily meditations, and we're going to use the Teresian method of meditation. This is used as a form of mental prayer, and the saints became saints because they practiced mental prayer. So I think it's important for us to learn the same techniques that the great saints used, like St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, and so on. So just to give you a brief outline of how the meditation flows, it always starts with a preparation. So we prepare our minds to place ourselves in the presence of God by means of a good thought. So for example, today's meditation is voluntary attachments. So, part of Lent is sacrificing, giving up our attachments, becoming more humble, giving alms, doing penance, prayer, and sacrifice. So that's where all of these next meditations day by day are going to be headed. But let's start with voluntary attachments. So in preparation we say, "O Lord, I place myself in your presence, begging you to enlighten my soul so that I may see what are the obstacles to my union with you." And the meditation begins. The first part of the meditation, and this is a quote from St. John of the Cross, Ascent of Mount Carmel, and the quote starts, "To be perfectly united to God by love and will, the soul must first be cleansed of all appetites of the will, even the smallest." In the language of St. John of the Cross, appetites are disordered inclinations or affections of oneself or creatures, tendencies which are, according to their seriousness, more or less contrary to the divine will being the will of God. God wishes us to love ourselves as well as all created things, in the measure assigned by Him, with a view to His pleasure and not to our own selfish satisfaction. These inclinations or appetites always give rise to venial sins, or at least to deliberate imperfections. When one willingly yields to them, even though it be only in matters of slight importance, the will of the soul, which freely assents to these failings, slight though they may be, is stained by this opposition to the will of God. For this reason, a perfect union cannot exist between its will and God's. Moreover, if these imperfections become habitual and the soul does not try to correct them, they form a great obstacle to divine union, and according to St. John of the Cross, quote, "They prevent not only divine union, but also advancement in perfection." End quote. He gives a few examples of these unmortified habitual imperfections: the habit of talking too much, unrestrained curiosity, attachment to little things, whether persons or objects, such as food and so forth, which the soul refuses to give up. There is also the attachment to one's comfort, to certain sensible satisfactions, little vanities, foolish self-complacency, attachment to one's own opinion or reputation. There is a real mushroom bed of appetites and disordered inclinations from which the soul will not free itself, precisely because it is attached to the meager selfish satisfaction which it finds in these wretched things. It is attached to them. That is why it cannot make the decision to give them up completely. These are precisely the habitual voluntary appetites of which St. John of the Cross says, quote, "One single unmortified appetite is sufficient to fetter the soul." End quote. On the other hand, when it is the question of imperfect inclinations arising solely from human weakness, of those which do not go beyond or get beyond the stage of first movements in which the will has no part, either before or after, but rather tries to repress as soon as it notices them, these do not prevent one from attaining divine union. It is the will that counts, and it must be completely free from the slightest attachment. The second part of the meditation, quote, "The least of these imperfections to which the soul is attached or accustomed is of more of a barrier to increasing and advancing in virtue than if one fell every day into several imperfections and isolated venial sins, not the result of bad habits." End quote. It is not so much these isolated falls, due to inadvertence or weakness, which hinder the soul's advancement, as it is little venial faults and even simple imperfections caused by habitual voluntary attachments which the soul does not take the trouble to uproot. Even though they are slight, they nevertheless constitute bonds which attach it, or attach yourself, to earth. Quote, "For it comes to the same thing whether a bird be held by a slender cord or by a stout one. Since even it be slender, the bird will be as well held as though it were stout for so long as it breaks it, not and flies not away." It is true that the slender one is the easier to break. Still, easy though it be, the bird will not fly away if it be not broken. And thus the soul that has attachment to anything, however great its virtue, will not attain the liberty of divine union. St. John of the Cross has only one thing to say about renouncement and detachment. Renounce everything. Be detached from everything. If this demand seems unreasonable, let us remember that it is pure evangelical doctrine, that it asks nothing more than what Jesus proposes to us when he says, "Renounce thyself," quote unquote. He asks us to renounce ourselves not only in this or that matter, but in everything that might prevent us from following him. Quote, "For he that will save his life shall lose it, and he that shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. If thy hand or thy foot scandalize thee, cut it off and cast it from thee." End quote. And that comes from Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 to 18. Jesus teaches us in these words that for the salvation and sanctification of our soul, we must give up everything that might become a stumbling block to us. It is precisely in this thorough renunciation, in this losing of self in everything, even in what is dearest to us, and if it were necessary, even to the extent of sacrificing our life, that we find the road to salvation and sanctity. Okay, and now just at the end, so we do our reading, we've done our preparation and our reading, our reflection, meditation, and we take time to pause here to reflect and meditate on that reading. We thoroughly examine the reading, the good thoughts contained in the reading, inflame our hearts with a greater conviction that God loves us and wishes to be loved by us. This leads us to the next step. So you can pause here, go and do your meditation, come back, and then we continue with the fourth part, which is the colloquy. And the colloquy consists of a loving conversation with God. It's the heart of prayer in which we tell him in our own words, or in the words of the colloquy in the book, that I want to love him and that I want to advance in his holy love, and that I wish to prove my love for him by my actions, by doing his holy will. So let's go on to the suggestion of the conversation that we have with the Lord in the book. Quote, "Late have I loved thee, O beauty ever ancient, ever new, late have I loved thee. Thou wert within me, and I looked outside. I sought thee, and miserable as I was, I longed for creatures. I was detained by the wonderful works of thy hands. Thou wert with me, but I exist only in thee. Thou hast called and cried to me in my deafness. Thou hast shone as lightning, brilliant enough to drive away my blindness. Thou hast scattered thy perfume. I breathed it, and now I sigh for thee. I have tasted thee, and now I hunger and thirst for thee. Thou hast touched me, and I burn with desire for thy peace. And that came from St. Augustine, the great St. Augustine. My God, give me the light necessary to recognize in myself all that keeps me from union with you. Grant me the light to recognize all the attachments which still bind me to creatures, and especially those which are most displeasing to you, because they proceed directly from pride and self-love. Yes, remember, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins that can, of course, send you to hell. In the secrecy of my heart, you teach me sweetly and gently. You show me clearly that I am still far from conforming my will to yours, in all things, for all things. I love and desire so many trifles, so many imperfections which you neither love nor desire, because they are contrary to your infinite perfection. Give me strength to wage a constant and courageous battle against them. You know, O Lord, that I have great need of your help, for I am too attached to myself to be capable of struggling against my disordered affections, of giving up so many little pleasures which feed my egotism. I love myself too much to sacrifice what separates me from you. Then let me present myself to you, O Lord, as a sick person to a surgeon. Plunge the knife into my soul, cut away and destroy all that displeases you and that is not in accord with your will. Isn't that beautiful? So this is our journey. This is what we need to strive for, and Lent brings us to a time of reflection and meditation where we can certainly strive to do that with the help of the Lord. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that you managed to reap some rewards from that, and we'll see you tomorrow. God bless.